Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our fourth Cal-HOSA live session. My name is Neil Betty, and I'm your Cal-HOSA State Vice President. Joining me tonight are two of my fellow state officers.
Hey guys, my name is Christian. I'm your post-secondary representative.
Hi everybody, I'm Archita Padmanabhan and I'm your parliamentarian.
Thank you all again so much for joining us tonight. This evening, we want to talk to you guys a bit about SLC and how to better prepare for your competitive events. So throughout this live session, we'll be going over several different tips and tools that you can use to prepare to compete at the State Leadership Conference, as well as ILC. For those of you that are here tonight, we want to let you know that there's going to be several questions that we as state officers will be asking you throughout the live session. And for these questions, we would really appreciate if you guys engage with us and put your responses in the chat. In addition, we'd really like for you all to ask questions of us, and then towards the end of the live session, we'll be answering these questions as you guys add them throughout the chat box. So again, answer our questions and ask questions as well. To start us off, I want to kind of quickly go over the limitations that you have in terms of event categories. So there are a total of 5 categories of competitive events that you guys have limits to. In order to kind of decide, the first event that you choose from is going to be either a health science event, health professions event, or emergency preparedness event. You can choose one from those 3 categories, and then you can choose either a leadership event or a teamwork event. So that's a total of 2 different events. Once again, either a health science event, health profession event, or a emergency preparedness event. So one of those 3, and then either a leadership event or a teamwork event. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Archita to talk a bit about STEM Premier.
Thank you, Neil. So many of you may know that some of your events may require you to submit materials through STEM Premier. So in order to use STEM Premier, we have a tutorial video on our Cal-HOSA YouTube webpage, the headquarters YouTube webpage, and you can use that video to navigate through creating an account through STEM Premier and finding your events so that you can submit these materials. So these materials are due on March 9th along with our scholarships. So if you plan to apply for Cal-HOSA scholarships or the National HOSA scholarships, remember that those are also on STEM Premier and are also due on March 9th. So we also have online testing from March 5th through 16th, which we all know that you have been preparing for. So just remember that your proctors are to be registered by February 28th, and these proctors cannot be your advisor. So please make sure that you do not have your advisor registered as a proctor. So another thing you may be reading over as you prepare for events is your competitive event guidelines. So these competitive event guidelines provide you with a checklist that you can look through so that you make sure that you have everything for your competitive event. Make sure you really know your guidelines. Try to memorize them even so that they're better instilled in your mind. And practice, practice, practice. Guys, we cannot emphasize this enough. You have to practice for your event to go perfectly. And also ask your advisor if you can have practice events so that you'll be better prepared for SLC.
Thanks, Archita. Here's some tips for your competitive events. Number 1 would be to look for a mentor, such as a health science teacher, for some assistance in preparing for your competitive event. Mentors care about your success, so show them that you're committed and putting all your effort in it. Next up would be to coordinate and schedule designated times to practice your events. This is very important, especially when you're in a team. Next up would be don't cram overnight, never works. And know your guidelines, including the general rules section. Note various dress codes enforced at each event. Number 1 would be to keep your hair off your shoulders for both girls and guys. And speak with members who have competed in events, such as previous competitors, and you can learn from their experiences. Here's a question for the audience. What were some of the things you have done to help you prepare for the upcoming conference? Type in your response in the chat box below, and we'll give you a shout out later on.
Thank you, Christian. So yes, as he mentioned, guys, that's a question that we were asking of you. And if you have any other questions, please engage with us in the chat box. So going on, one of the other things that a lot of different competitive events involve at SLC is public speaking, whether you're working on some kind of presentation or you're actually giving a speech to a panel of judges. A lot of the different things require you to speak in front of an audience or speak in front of other people. And so one of the things we as state officers wanted to do is share some different tips with you on how you can enhance your public speaking skills. So one of the main things that I love to do whenever I'm practicing for a presentation is actually watch other people present. When you're watching other people present, whether it's on YouTube or when you're watching something like a TED Talk, and you kind of observe the way someone is speaking, how are they using your hands to gesture certain things during the presentation? What's their demeanor like? How are they engaging with the audience? These different things really give you kind of an idea of how you can kind of strengthen your own confidence and then strengthen your own presentation. So one of the main tips we have is to make sure you go out and look at different people presenting their ideas and sharing their thoughts, and it'll give you better ideas on how you want to do the same thing as well. Another one of the things that is very important, and this is going to be easy for all of you because you'll all be dressed in blues, but make sure you look sharp and look the part when you're presenting. When you feel confident about yourself and your outfit, it makes you feel more confident about your presentation. And as you guys are going to be, dressed up in blues, it'll make you guys feel even more professional, and then your presentation will therefore be even more professional as well. So make sure you're dressed in the correct HOSA attire during your presentation. The third thing we want to discuss is making sure that you know your material. This is one of the most important things because without knowing your material, you won't give the presentation that you need to give. So make sure you read over your speech over and over again. If you're giving a presentation of some sorts and you have slides of something with you, then make sure you read over your bullet points over and over again. It's important not to sound scripted, but it is important to also make sure that you know all the material that you're going to be presenting during your competitive event. And don't ever wing it. Make sure that you, again, practice beforehand. As Archita mentioned earlier, practicing is very, very important because the more you practice, the more you get familiar with what you're saying. And then when you get up there to actually present in front of your audience, you know exactly what you're supposed to say. You feel more confident, and that confidence really will show in front of the audience. So make sure you practice, don't wing it, and know your material really, really well.
Great tips, Neil. And I'm adding on to that one. Approach your speech with I've got this attitude. If you feel confident, then you look confident to the judges. Another thing would be to slow down when you're talking, emphasize words. People tend to listen better when you're talking slower rather than when you speak faster. Body language is very important. Mind how you move your body. I'll give you an example. If you are sitting down and you're telling a story to someone and they're leaning back, that usually means that they're not interested. Whereas if they're leaning forward and they're engaging you in questions, then that means they're interested. And lastly, you have to make a very good first impression. When you have a job interview, a firm handshake is very important. It means that you're very confident. Don't fidget around, don't play around with your pen. It usually means you're anxious. And it shouldn't be a reason if you're to be anxious if you're proud of what you do, right? Like you came up and you should be good. Another thing would be punctuality, very important. If your appointment is at 10 a.m., arrive 15 minutes earlier. Do you guys remember the HOSA's motto? If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you get left behind. And here is actually another question for you guys at the audience. What are some tips that you give on how to prepare for public speaking and treating speaking anxieties? Comment your response down below, and we'll give you a shout out later on.
All right. So other than our public speaking events, many of you may be competing in our online testing or knowledge test events. So here's some study habits that we as the officers find very useful when we're also studying for these events. So here's how you should approach studying. You should approach it with a positive mindset. Really approach it with the I've got this attitude like you would approach it, a speech. Don't catastrophically think, don't overcomplicate things because that can really just make you more and more anxious and nervous. Also, don't compare yourself to others. You're here to learn and you're here to learn for yourself. So don't care about what others are doing. Just make sure that you're learning and you're focusing on your journey. So where you study is also important. You can't really study in a loud area because you'll get so distracted that you won't even be studying in the end. So make sure you pick a quiet space to study, maybe a library or even in your own room. You can close the door and you can ask for some privacy, and that would be awesome. Also, minimize your distractions. Bring everything you need for your event, but don't bring anything you don't need. By this, we mean please don't bring your phones in while you're studying. We know that phones are very useful, but they can also be very distracting. So make sure that maybe your phones are put away and that you're using everything you need to study. One thing that we also find useful is outlining things and rewriting notes. So Writing is proven to help with content retention and memory, so it's really good to keep writing things down so that you have them instilled in your brain. You should also rewrite topics and outlines so that you can further keep them in your brain and just remember them throughout your test. And repetition is really important, so keep rewriting those things and make sure that you have them all set. Another fun thing that you could do is play memory games. So flashcards are really easy to use, or mnemonic devices and songs. And one song that you might be familiar with is the quadratic formula song, which you might have used in math. So you can create similar songs for any of your tests. And also, if you need other help for knowledge tests, you can always ask the people around you that are studying with you, or just your advisors that might have some really awesome information for you. So here's a question for you guys. If you've taken an online test before, do you have any tips that you can share with us? Please comment it on the chat on the side, and we'll probably give you a shout out.
Great tips, Archita. Just adding on to that, you also practice individually or with your friends or your team. Read out loud to an audience, have an open mind to their critiques, because there's always something new that you can learn every day. Another thing would be to take breaks and give yourself rewards, like letting yourself watch TV, eat some food. I'll give you an example of what I used to do in nursing school, actually. Once a week, I tend to have a break where I don't really do anything school-related. I just relax, go on a hike, just to get my mind off the stress. And might not seem much, but it really does help. Another thing would be to eat healthy, right? Eat a balanced meal. Junk food is okay, but not all the time. Include fruits and vegetables in your meals and snacks. Work out builds discipline. And sleep. Sleep's really good for you. And lastly, don't forget to really learn about your topic. This isn't all about competition, but you are learning new things to create your future. So it's very important.
Okay, so we have a few frequently asked questions that we've gathered over the years for SLC. So here's one. What do you do after your competitive events? Well, we have a variety of workshops presented by various public professionals in the healthcare field, as well as leadership professionals. And also, we, the state officers, will have a workshop at SLC this year. So look out for that, and it should be really great. So you'll learn a lot more about healthcare as well as leadership, and it'll really make you guys better future health professionals. And here's the second question. I want to see a schedule ahead of time. So where can I find it? So we have a preliminary agenda or schedule on our Cal-HOSA website. It's on calhosa.net, which is our official conference website. And we also have a new app this year called Attendify. So you can download Attendify on App Store or Android. It's a blue icon, so don't get it confused with another Attendify app. But if you download that app and then search for Cal-HOSA, it should pop right up, and you can join in as a member. And the schedule should pop up on the chat on the side in the menu bar. So be sure to look at that and download that before the conference so that you have it handy.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and with that, we're going to go on to our question and answer session and our comment session. So we're going to look at the different things that you guys commented throughout the live session as we were speaking. And then if there's any other questions, please ask them now in the chat box on your right-hand side, and we're going to go ahead and answer them to the best of our ability. So the first question we have is from Miss Turtle. How many recognition events can I do? So actually, great question. There's no limit to recognition events. You can commit and as many of those as you would like. It's only those first 5 categories that there's limits to. So yes, great question. Recognition events, you can do as many as you'd like. Question from Mr. Arjo. How do you take time out of your busy schedule to prepare for events? Good question. Christian, you want to take this one for us?
Sure, Neil. You just have to coordinate with your teammates. In my opinion, there is no such thing as a very busy schedule. If you need time, you make time. And if you have teammates, what you can do is do a conference call, do Google Hangouts, do it at night, maybe an hour each week. You don't have to do it all in one day, and you just make time for it. If it's very important, you'll make time for it. So.
Thank you, Christian. Another question from Mr. Arjo. What are some other ways to limit distractions? Archita, you talked about this in the live session. You want to take that question for us?
Yes, Neil, I'll take it. So phones can be a great distraction, so be sure to put those away. Other electronics can also really distract you. I mean, phones aren't the only thing. We have iPads, computers these days. Oh, there's just so many. So you should put those away and make sure you stick to your notes and your books so that you'll feel more prepared. Also, one big thing that really distracts me is people. So I have a lot of friends and family, and I'm sure all the other state officers and you guys also have lots of friends and family. So usually when I'm around them, I like to tell them politely to be quiet and to let me study so that I can really focus. And keeping this out there will really just really let them know that I'm studying and that they'll be more conscious about me studying. So that's a really good way to limit distractions.
Thank you, Archita. A question from Miss Turtle. How do I motivate my teammates to practice because I feel like I'm the only one practicing? You know, that's a really good question, and I think that's something that a lot of teammates might come up to at some point where you feel like you're the one putting in a lot of work, but your teammates aren't. One of the best things to start off with is very open lines of communication. If you feel that way, tell your teammates. You know, everyone's investing a lot of time in this. I'm sure you and your chapter are investing time, effort, and money to go to the state leadership conference. And it's a big deal for you guys. It's like towards the end of the year, you know, everyone's competing to win and competing to learn. It's a very, very great event for you all. So, you know, remind your teammates of that. Tell them how important this is to you and remind them of how important it is to them. And if they feel like, you know, you feel like you're still not getting the full effort that you need from them, try to add some kind of, you know, motivation for them too. You know, maybe there's something that your teammate wants to get out of this event and remind them of that motivation or that incentive that they have. And at some point, if you really need to come to it, then, you know, talk to your advisor, ask them for help or guidance. But usually the first two methods of, you know, giving them some ideas for motivation and really communicating with them can give you guys a good start to working together as successfully as a team to prepare for the conference. And another question from the future pharmacologist. How do I get my teammates to follow the plans we make to study? All right, great question. Christian, you want to take that one for us?
Sure, Neil. This is actually connected to what Neil was talking about with the previous question. Just remind them about what your goals are and tell them like it is important for you. And obviously, both of you guys made that decision to go to this event, so just remind them. And if there's really a case, talk to your advisor, right? And just practice, coordinate a time between you guys that'll be really convenient for both of you. So just remind them.
Thank you, Christian. A question from Alexis Rosas. Are there any online practice tests for our competitive events? Archita, you talked about online testing. Why don't you go and take this question for us?
Okay, thank you. So, Alexis, unfortunately, there aren't any official practice tests for the online testing events, but there are a few quizzes out there that you might want to search up. Just search up your event name and they should pop right up. Or else what I've done in the past is that usually in the test breakdowns, there are like subjects that they go through. So I search up those subjects and look for similar practice tests and anything that I can find so that I can really get used to the material and know those types of questions. But unfortunately, there aren't any official practice tests that we have. So I'm sorry about that, but hopefully you can find something else online.
Thank you, Archita. So we have a question from Sarah Katabi. I'm interested in competing in the biomedical debate. What are some good resources to look into for practice and for preparation? Sarah, that's an excellent question. Why don't you, I think the best way to really start this off is to look at the guidelines for this year. So for the 2017-2018 year, what are the different guidelines that National HOSA has put out for the event? That's a great place to start. For the social media topic for the year, look at the different online resources, books and stuff. And remember that you need to look at both sides of the arguments, the pros and the cons to the topic that they give you. So make sure you look at that very closely. There's a lot of scientific reports, online journals, and things like that that you can look at in terms of resources. And then once again, after you look at your competitive guidelines for biomedical debate, then after that, you can look at what specifically you need to learn more about the topic. And then from there, you'll carry out more research. And there's all kinds of avenues for research online. And your event guidelines will give you some more details for that as well. And then the last thing, and I think I talked about this earlier when we were talking about public speaking, is to make sure you practice. You and your team, you're going to be working together to come up with your research and your arguments, and then you can debate other teams or debate with others as well. Share your ideas with other people, have them find out, is there anything that you're missing? Is there something you didn't really cover properly? Is there anything that's not being properly communicated in your presentation? All of these different things can help you really get a leg up during your competition for a biomedical debate. Great question, Sarah. And another question from Mr. Arjo. I am a chapter president and have many members. What are some other things besides holding mock events that I can do to help motivate my chapter study for their events? Christian, this is going to be our last question. You want to go and take that for us?
Absolutely, Neil. Other things you can do is you have to do things that promote team building. If there's a good bond with a team, right, then they'll be more inclined to participate in these kinds of things. Other thing would be to have breakfast, hang out, but also keep in mind that you have to have a common goal. So just, that'd be it.
All right, thank you, Christian. And so now we're going to look at some of the audience responses to the questions that we asked earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and read these out. Preparing for the upcoming conference, there's some responses for that. Ms. Turtle said that they had a mock SLC at their school, and that was super helpful. That's very, very true. Having mock events is a great way to prepare. So thank you, Ms. Turtle, for sharing that. Mr. Arjo says, I usually take some time off every day to prepare for my event. Time management is key in preparation. I definitely agree, Mr. Arjo. That's a great way to prepare, taking some time, allocating some time out of every day or whenever you have the chance to prepare. That's a great way to progressively work your way up to the event. A comment from Banu Upadyalula. Our regional ALC just happened, and it's my first year in HOSA, so that was very helpful. That's actually very, very true. If you do have a region ALC, I know Region 1 just had one of those. It is a great way to prepare because you have a really good idea of what you're supposed to do at conference. So that's awesome. Congratulations to you. Another comment from Sricharan Pasula. I get help from a college student who works as an EMT for my CPR first aid event. That is excellent. Looking to your resources, looking to people who actually do this stuff in the real world. That's a great, great way to find out, what exactly you should be doing, what things you might be messing up on, and then, correcting those mistakes for the actual conference. That is excellent. Congratulations to you. Future Pharmacologist says, I'm doing medical terminology online, so I take 30 minutes out of my daily schedule to practice consistently. Again, excellent. Taking time out of every single day, allocating the time, putting in the time towards preparing for your event on a routine basis is going to pay off towards the end. Great job, Future Pharmacologist, and I'm sure you'll get there. For public speaking tips, Sricharan says, take a deep breath and confidently smile before walking in to compete. I could not agree more. That few seconds right before you just tell yourself, I got this. That is a great, great way to prepare before you go in for your event. Thank you for sharing that. Ms. Turtle says, I like practicing my speeches in front of a mirror to help practicing having good eye contact. That is an excellent tip. For those of you, especially doing things like prepared speaking, or if you're giving some sort of presentation, if you want to, not practice in front of other people yet, or it's late at night, you want to practice on your own, go in front of a mirror. Make sure you're able to make eye contact with yourself. Sometimes, as I'm practicing, I'll make sure I make eye contact with certain parts of the room as if there's people sitting there. So you imagine other audience members there. That's very, very helpful. Thank you for sharing that. Public speaking tips beyond that, Alexis Rosas says, usually when I have to do a presentation, I take a deep breath and tell myself that I got this. Again, having that confidence in yourself is huge. So that's really, really awesome, Alexis. Great job. Mr. Arjo says, I've personally experienced speaking anxieties. To help myself, I tell myself that I need to do this and overcome this fear. That is great, Mr. Arjo. Great, great advice. Telling yourself that, this is something that you will have to do eventually, and then confronting the fear that you have for public speaking. That is a great way to, practice and then eventually get there, because the more you practice doing something like this, the better you're going to get at it. So that's great, Mr. Arjo. Thank you for sharing. And our last comment from Ms. Turtle on online testing tips. Quizlets are a great way to study. And for those of you that don't know what Quizlets are, I think Archita touched upon this earlier as well. Quizlets, they're like a sort of portable flashcards. You can use Quizlets online at Quizlet.com, or they also have an app for the Android and the iPhone softwares. So whenever you're trying to study something for a certain event, using Quizlets is actually an excellent tool. So thank you all of you for sharing those responses. We're going to move on to the end of our live session. Thank you so much. So just a few quick reminders before we close off tonight. If you have any chapter photos, please be sure to include your chapter name, your region, and then your chapter's Instagram, and send them in to amanda.calhosa@gmail.com. That's our state secretary, and she's going to be compiling all of those for the state conference. And those are all going to be due on February 16th. So please, please send in your chapter photos. Another deadline for the Talent No Talent show and the patriotic song submission or the national anthem submission. Those submissions are going to be due on February 22nd. So if you or your team members want to come together and share some kind of either dance or sing a song or other kind of talent or no talent that you want to share with us at the State Leadership Conference, please send those in via the Cal-HOSA website by February 22nd. And then on February 23rd, the day after that, registration for SLC is going to be due at 8 p.m. So make sure your advisors are aware of that by February 23rd at 8 p.m., everyone needs to be registered if you are going to be attending the State Leadership Conference. And then the online testing phase, remember, I think Archita, you mentioned this earlier as well, that your proctor cannot be your advisor. And your advisors must register those proctors by February 28th because the online testing phase, the window that you have to complete the testing is going to be between March 5th and March 16th. So remember that your proctors need to be registered by February 28th, and then you have between March 5th and March 16th to complete the testing. The state officer application, for those of you who are looking to be candidates for state officers, it's a great process. I would strongly recommend you do it. The deadline for that is going to be March 9th. So your application and all the supplemental materials for the application are going to be due on March 9th. And that is also the same deadline for STEM Premier. So by March 9th, your state officer applications need to be turned in, and that is also the same deadline for the STEM Premier online platform. So make sure those are done on time, because if everything is not turned in on time, then we will not be able to consider you either for state officers or for the STEM Premier event that you're competing in. And lastly, our 5th live session for this year is going to be on March 4th. That's going to be kind of like an SLC pep rally, and that is going to be our last live session before the State Leadership Conference. So once again, we hope you all come back and join us on March 4th for our 5th live session of the year and our last one before the State Leadership Conference. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. We hope you guys got some valuable tips out of this. And if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to contact all of us. And with that, thank you and good night.